Hello, everyone. This is our first ever episode of hopefully a whole collection of conversations with teachers, Iyengar yoga teachers, and also people who are within the Iyengar yoga community and want to share a little bit of their lives with us. These conversations will be organized by Iyengar Yoga Kent, but they are going to be public for everyone to listen and to enjoy. The first one of them is with our senior teacher and friend, Lydia Holmes. And Lydia is coming to teach a workshop on menopause on the 7th of February this year in Blackheath. So if you want to know a little bit more about the workshop and Lydia, stay tuned. And here is the conversation we had just a few minutes ago. So hello, Lydia. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Great. I would like to ask you a few questions, mostly regarding to our life as yogis. But I'm curious to know what your life was like before you started being an Iyengar yogi.
Okay, well, actually, I started yoga very young. So I traveled in India when I was 18, and I went around India for about 6 months with some friends. And I had an amazing trip, which really opened my mind. And of course, being in India, the Indian culture, I got exposed to yoga, and I had an interest, but I didn't really know much about yoga. Although I visited temples and holy sites, and I met sadhus, and I got exposed to the Indian culture, I still didn't know that much about the kind of yoga I got into. But when I got back, I decided I'd join a yoga class. And I was going to university. So I joined university. I had no interest in joining any other clubs or anything else. The only thing I wanted was to join a yoga class. And I went to Manchester University. And I was very fortunate that my first teacher was Marion Kilburn, and she's a teacher in Manchester who was teaching in a very grotty sports centre in Manchester, students. So I turned up, went to class, and by the second class, I was completely hooked. And I remember saying to her at the end of the second class, how do you become a yoga teacher? Because I felt so amazing after the class that I wanted to feel like that all the time. And she kind of looked at me knowingly and said, well, ask me in a few years, you know. And so I just carried on. I was at university quite soon after I met Edgar. And he got interested in the yoga classes via me going to Marion, because I told him that I was going to this class and it was amazing. And so he went to her as well. And then, Edgar and I got together some years later.
In
Sorry.
case people don't know,
Mm.
Edgar is also a yoga teacher. By the way, he was my assessor both times. And were you studying the same career at uni? Or
No,
did you meet at university?
I was studying English literature, and Edgar was studying philosophy and politics. And we were friends for maybe 6 months before we got together. But during that time, we talked a lot about yoga because, we had this shared interest, and we were going to Marion. And once we got together, Marion realized me and Edgar were quite keen and invited us into other classes, so not just the student class. So we started going to classes in Chorlton and places that were further afield where we had to cycle a long way. We went to her classes, and she's an amazing teacher. She was very inspiring. She's very untypical in some ways as an Iyengar teacher, in that she wasn't at all scary. She was very welcoming. She was very compassionate and kind. She was very interested in nature. She would talk a lot about she used to walk in the Himalayas, and she went up to the Everest Base Camp, and she went to Euro Yoga with Guruji, and she'd allude to these things in classes, and she kind of got us curious. And then she was Irish, and she was into Irish dancing. So at the end of class, she used to say, "Okay, you're coming Irish dancing with us now." So we would do a really intense class. She was an amazing teacher because she kind of weave a spell around you. You'd be working really hard and not really realize it. And at the end, you'd feel completely, transformed. And then we would go dancing, and we'd be whirled around Irish dancing, set dancing from partner to partner all night. And then we'd cycle home and we'd be absolutely exhausted. But Marion had so much energy, she just kind of carried us, and she got us, really enthusiastic about it. And then when we were finishing our degrees, she came up to me one day and said, "Do you still want to be a yoga teacher?" And I had completely forgotten that I'd even said to her. And I said, "Oh, yeah, why not?" 'Cause I didn't know what to do with my life. I'm thinking, what next? And so she took us over to Duckingfield, and we met Jean and Trisha Booth, and we started teacher training with them. Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was very intense, but we were lucky because we were young. We had time to practice, and we would practice, 2, 3 hours every day. And then we would go to 2 or 3 classes a week, and we were quite committed. But halfway through our time, we kind of had a little wobble, let's say, where we were thinking, is Iyengar yoga the thing for us? So we went to India, and Jean said to me, try and get into Rimyi classes, but I don't think they'll let you in because they just changed the rules. So we went to Pune, and unfortunately, they just changed the rule. They wouldn't let us in. But
what was the rule?
The rule was used to be that you could just turn up and join, but now you had to apply, and you needed to apply in advance and have, I don't know how long ahead, but they were getting busy in classes, really. That was why. So we went to Rajiv and Swati up in the Himalaya because Jean had given us a piece of paper with their names on, and we phoned them up and they said, "Okay, come up." And it was a bit of an adventure finding them, but we got there. And we were really fortunate again because there was supposed to be some other students coming and they didn't come. So Edgar and I had private tuition with Rajiv and Swati for 3 weeks. And it was, again, transformational. And of course, Rajiv is very keen on the philosophy, and he was teaching us a lot of that. And it completely put us back, like, yeah, we're going back, we're finishing our teacher training, and this is the right path. It made it very clear to us that this is what we wanted to do. So that's what we
didn't really
did.
go too far away from the Iyengar method, in actual fact, because
No,
they were
no.
also Iyengar or disciples of the Iyengars, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've actually, I don't think I've ever really been to any other class than Iyengar class. I think one time at a festival I joined, there was an Ashtanga class, and they were curious about me because they thought I'd done Ashtanga before because I kind of knew what I was doing, but I didn't because it was, a different school. And in India, yeah, when we traveled around that time, we did have a little look at, like, we thought about joining the university. We went to Banaras University and we said, can we join your course? And we went to talk to this academic about it. And we straight away we were like, he's not a yogi because he talked about yoga, but he didn't practice anything, it seemed. And we just were really unimpressed with him. And I think probably we were a bit arrogant and a bit naive, and actually he probably knew quite a lot, but we it seemed to us that he had no physical discipline and therefore he couldn't really teach us anything. So yeah, we explored a little bit, came across all kinds of yogis doing all kinds of things. You know, people. There was a sadhu who said to us, "Come and meet us at dawn one day," and he was showing us all the kriyas. He was doing the inhaling the water through his nostrils. He
Yes.
was doing the neti. He was doing the drinking a whole bucket of water and bringing it back, you know, and we were sitting there with our eyes popping out of our heads. Well, he showed us all this stuff.
Did he invite you to try or?
No, he was curious. He wanted us to take photographs. So this was back in the day of, you know, the old camera where you have film, and we took photos. And then he said he wanted the film. So we never even kept the film. He wanted it at the end. So we were like, fine, you know, it's his. He wants to do something with it. And it was interesting, really interesting. But you know, again, a far cry from what we do.
Mhm. And since then, Lydia, how many times did you or have you been to India or Pune?
Well, I've been to India many times because I did travel a lot in India again and again. And then I've been to Pune 4 times. So when my children were young, I just decided I didn't want to leave them. And so there was a very big gap. And then Edgar and I used to go separately. So he would go, and one of us would keep the classes going, look after the children, or I would go. So we did that for some years. But we've been, you know, to Rajiv and Swati, and also, you know, to Pune, but also just traveling. In the early days, there was a lot of traveling. I love India, and I just every time I go to Pune, I'm kind of half of me is wants to be somewhere else because I just know there's so many amazing, beautiful places to explore in India.
Yeah. And you need a lot of time also
Of
just to
course, and
go from
I
one
yeah,
end
and
to the
I
other.
still I still fantasize, but now my life is quite grounded by the studio, so it's difficult to get away for a long spell.
I was going to ask you about that actually. So, how long have you had a studio, and what's the studio's name?
So studio's called Yoga Tree. We named it after Yoga Vrksa, Guruji's book of the Tree of Yoga, because we really loved that book, and that was kind of our introduction to the philosophy. So quite early on, when we were first starting, Marian introduced us to that book, and we read it. So we kind of actually always had it. If we ever have a studio, we'll call it Yoga Tree. We kind of decided that a long time before we got it. And we taught in yoga, you know, no, well, in school halls and arts centres and wherever we could, village halls for about 20 years. So it was a long period of traveling around with our kit in our bags, and we always had a fantasy of having a studio, but it was just not attainable, not affordable, and then we were just looking, you know, checking out places locally, and my mother saw this place, and she said it's quite small, but you know it might work. So we put a bid in to buy this place, and we didn't think we'd get it, but we did, and then it turned out to be actually really problematic. So the purchase and the renovations took us nearly 5 years. So it was a big project, and Edgar actually, luckily, is very handy. He's done building work in the past, and he knows a lot about what to do. And he did most of the work himself. I mean, obviously, we got electricians in and plumbers and things for specialists, but he worked incredibly hard on making the studio what it is. And yeah, it was hard going because we were still running classes and we had our children, and we have another job. We job share another job where we care for a man with learning difficulties.
Right.
So all in all, it was quite challenging.
I bet. I
But
mean, I suppose having a yoga studio is a completely different level from anything else. Just,
mm,
I mean, the preparation to become a teacher,
mm,
the trying to build up a class or two
mm,
or three, also very difficult. But then having a and maintaining and sustaining the studio, especially through the pandemic years, and etc. etc.
mm,
So it has to be. It is still a dream of mine. London
mm.
is a completely different cup of tea
Yes,
than
yeah,
outside London, I suppose,
yeah.
because spaces are so much more restricted.
Mm.
But I
Yeah, I
think
mean, it was one thing I wasn't afraid of was we've already built a student base. So because we taught in the area for 20 years, we already had lots of classes and we already had lots of students.
hmm,
So of course we were a little bit worried because we used to go to them, would they come to us? Because we were driving here and there and, then it changes. But actually, that aspect of it was not ever a concern. The main aspect was really, is the studio going to be big enough? Is it going to, are we going to afford it? We had to remortgage our house, so it was financially put us in a bit of difficulty for a while. And then COVID. So COVID came, and on one level, actually, it turned out to be quite good for us because we were about to open when there was the first lockdown. We had one more month. Then we were going to open. Of course, we were really disappointed, but then it meant Edgar could take more time over the finishing off. So there was still quite a lot to do in the studio. And he was able to come here and do the building work and finish off nicely, properly, before we opened. Otherwise, we would have hurried it and just got it open as soon as possible. And then, of course, initially it was difficult because we could only have 6 students in the studio to start with, and gradually we took it up to 8 and then to 10 and so on. But it was difficult in that respect. But in a way, it made it quite a gentle start. But we did have the worst bit really was what we opened in the September, and then the next lockdown happened in the November. And then I don't know if you remember, but they were pretty cruel to the yoga teachers because we had a long lockdown then through till May. So that was frustrating.
hmm.
But we just took all our classes online at that point, and yeah, we got through it. And in some ways, I think it was a good thing for us just to slow down with our opening.
Okay, that's great.
Mm.
Um, are you are you happy with it now? Are you
Yeah,
happy
yeah,
that you
it's
have
fine.
your own place and do you
Oh yeah,
share it
yeah,
with other
yeah.
teachers also, or
Yes,
is it
yes.
just
So we've got
yourself?
4 other teachers who teach here. And we hold workshops and get teachers in sometimes here. So yeah, it's running fine. It's going well. It's
Amazing.
there are some classes sometimes a bit quieter, but then, it picks up again, and it's like any studio, it has its kind of moments of feeling like it's oh dear, and then oh it's fine. So it's good.
Okay, so Lydia,
Mm.
we are also going to have you over here in
Mhm.
Kenton,
Mhm.
and it's going to be in a studio, which
Mhm.
is a home studio, and it's very cozy and it has all the props.
Mm.
Um, and it is about a subject that is really close to many of us, that's
Yeah.
menopause.
Mm.
Why did you choose that topic, or why specifically, or did you have that in mind? Do you usually work with that? Do you have a specific class for women, and what can we expect from that workshop?
Well, firstly, the majority of students used to be women. And in fact, these days I've got more and more men joining, but I've always taught a lot of women. It's really my interest came when through my own experience. So, after I had my second child, I started to get very painful and difficult periods, which I'd never had before. And I ignored it for a while until it got really bad, where I felt so bad I couldn't really function for a few days. I couldn't, I couldn't go out and about. I would pass out with the pain. It was bad, or I'd be sick with pain. So, of course, I go to the doctor and they discovered that I have endometriosis. In those days, again, endometriosis was less known about, and I knew nothing about it actually at that point. And so I had to have an ovary removed because I had a big cyst on my ovary, which was a shock. I had no idea that, this was going to happen. It happened quite quickly. Within kind of few weeks, I was having surgery. And I had the ovary removed, and I felt pretty awful afterwards for a while. And then again, I hoped that things would settle, but my periods were still bad and still problematic. And then I went to see a specialist, and he gave me a laparoscopy, which is where they put a camera in and look, and they could see that I had endometrial stuff mostly in my pelvis, but quite widespread. And they gave me minor surgery there. It was keyhole surgery. But he just said to me, the best thing for you is going to be menopause. So up till then, I hadn't really thought about menopause that much. But he said that, when you get to menopause, then a lot of the symptoms will settle down. Anyway, this just meant that I started to take the period practice very, very seriously. I started to research more closely what to do. When I went to Pune, they put me in the medical class and gave me some help with the endometrial symptoms. And so I just became more interested in the subject generally. And then I realized that there's so many women suffering, and so many women don't talk about it, even to their close friends. They might eventually talk, but it seemed to me that it's a bit of a taboo subject, and it's something that all women go through, and I feel it's very important. And so I felt like now I know something about this subject. Maybe I can help people. And so I used to run menopause workshops, and particularly, I had students who would have that continuous bleeding where they would just bleed and get very anemic, and their periods were incredibly heavy, and they were really not able to get on with their lives. And I became quite interested in this article that Geeta wrote about, practice through the whole month for women. And that's got quite a lot of information there. Also went to a workshop with Corinne Birrier quite a long time ago, and she really outlined a lot of the things you can do to help women to arrest the bleeding, to stop the bleeding when they have these very long spells of bleeding. And so I just felt like I wanted to learn more and to share it. And then, of course, I volunteered to do the menopause workshop for the therapy archive. So that's really the sort of basis of the knowledge I have is through that article that Geeta wrote, and Corinne, the workshop that Corinne taught.
So your approach would be more towards let's say, the old school, between commas, literature. What do you think about the latest literature by Iyengar teachers, specifically the latest book by Keller?
Yeah, Rita Keller. I haven't read her latest book.
Okay,
Is there something particularly
it is
new
called
there?
Iyengar Yoga for Menopause, and it's almost 600 pages,
Yes.
and it's very, very thorough.
Okay.
At the same time, yes, it is. For what I understand, is not precisely the same approach as Geeta would have.
Okay.
I am in this kind of dichotomy because I would really, personally, I would really like to carry on with my practice and become more and more senior in my practice. But I
Yes,
also understand that there is one whole week of the month where
yes,
I have to put a stop on whatever, putting my foot behind the head and all the rest of stuff, massive
yeah,
arches of the back. And so what I feel is, can my practice be respectful of my body, or can my practice be respectful of what I really want to do? And that's when the clash of, let's say, approaches come up.
yes.
And then I'm very confused. And so I don't
Well, I
really
have
know.
to say, of course, I completely understand that, but I found that was one of the gifts of having had this problem. For me, I learned a lot, and I totally adhered to very, very closely the recommendations of what to do when I had my period and immediately after my period. And I felt I became more in touch with my energy through the month. So I kind of understood more that I really needed to do a lot of restorative and forward bend practice during my period. And I really, enjoyed it. I loved it because I just let myself really go deep into that. And I think so. I've been through menopause now, and actually, just sort of anecdotally, I had a very trouble-free menopause. I had practically no symptoms whatsoever from my menopause. So I put that down to the yoga to some extent.
Mm.
And I think that it's really good to let yourself be in those quieter spaces. And in fact, I feel like that's kind of more mature practice than the ambition to be able to keep active and do challenging poses. And I mean, actually, I was doing my senior assessments during some of them during this period when I was having really terrible periods. And but I still was working when I could on the intense asana that you needed to do for the senior. But I was also giving myself that space to really rest and really restore. And I feel like it kind of deepened my understanding of yoga a lot more, just to be more absorbed in the sensations and more sensitive and more reflective about what was happening. And I felt like it was almost the pain of it, because I did have a lot of pain, was I could just feel how the poses were easing my pain, and I could feel how things were moving and shifting in releasing via the asanas. And I found that really quite profound and beautiful
Mm.
experience.
Almost liberating, right?
Yeah,
Good. Right. So I am really looking forward to, yes, having a Q&A as well. I'm sure that we will have time for a Q&A in that workshop,
sure.
because so many people have different, I mean, you talk
Mm.
about pain, but there are also, different types of pain. Migraines is massive as
Yes.
well, so pelvic pain. But there's
Mm.
also a lot going on with, or as far as I understand, with fertility as well,
Yes.
and um, also youngsters
Yes.
having a lot of pain and not necessarily being open to talk about it. And so this is
Mm.
a process. I don't have daughters myself, but my friends who do have daughters, we are going through this perimenopausal menopausal period whilst the girls are going into their womanhood.
Yes. Yes.
And
Very common that.
it's, yes, and then hormonal changes
It's a
for everyone
difficult
in the
combination,
household.
I think.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
I think it's just worth a chat, not just of what you can do in the mat or on the mat, but
Yeah.
also how to cope with real life, or other things
Yeah,
as
and I
well.
think also one thing I remember Prashant saying, which I've always found really helpful, was that, we have this delusion that, we're always progressing. Everything's going to get better and better and better and better like this. We're going up. If we have a graph, this is what we're going to start our practice and we're going to improve. And he said, you're just letting yourself in for misery thinking that, because your life is, you're going to go like this and then you're going to go like this, because it's just the nature of the four stages of our lives. And we may, we will go to a more, I mean, I don't even want to use the word deteriorate because that seems negative, but we need to accept our maturing stage and to become more settled and to go more inward. And really, that's what's expected in yoga, that you reach that point where ultimately it's all about withdrawing from your family duties and becoming more caught in your practice and being in a quiet place and just getting ready for what's coming later, which
Yeah.
we all know what that is one day.
Wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Lydia, thank you so much for
Mm.
joining us.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
we will now switch off the recording and so we can chat a little bit after.
Great.
I hope you have enjoyed this conversation. Please join us for the workshop visiting Geeta Iyengar Yoga. The link is below in the captions. And if you want to know more about Lydia, go to yogatree.co.uk.